Hello, welcome to this session. We're looking at the book My People, My Africa. Now, if you've read this book, it is absolutely intriguing. It is absolutely thought provocative. There are a lot of concepts which are discussed in this book, which would definitely make you think, especially when the author explains that these are truthful accounts, because then you get to question, well, are there different truths? Because for the most part, it questions the truths that you already would be living by. If have been groomed in a certain way, there are certain truths that you live by. And this book expresses truths from the historical African narrative, which are very, very different from what uh, most people have grown up in, even Africans, because for the most part, people have been groomed according to the Christian teachings. And so this comes across, and it even comes across as fictional, as myth. But when the author expresses that these are truthful accounts, a person, has to either, say that, well, the author is lying, or give them the benefit of the doubt and say, well, it could be that that is their truth. It could be that in another part of the world that this did happen, the mystery of life. Now, a couple of the truths which are being discussed here, a couple of the points that are discussed here, I like to pair them with what the Bible teaches because they speak, in contradiction to what the Bible would be saying, which is why a lot of people who are Christians would speak against this book, criticize this book, because of certain of these things which it speaks, in total contradiction with. The author, however, has got both a Christian as well as a cultural background. Christian Catholic as well as a cultural background. So you would find it quite interesting how he has had both lifestyles and he has been groomed in both lifestyles for years, right? And but he presents this from the perspective of being one who was given the duty to safeguard this information. So it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting. In the next part of this, by the way, I will share a summary of what he shares is the account of creation, okay, how people came about. He expresses basically the Hottentots, the Bantu people. By the way, when talks of the Bantu people, it's primarily all of the African people because it's the Basotho, Bavenda, every nationality who associates themselves or when they describe themselves would have a Batswana, Bapedi, and he goes on Batonga, and all of these nationalities will fall under Bantu people, as well as the history of the Pygmies, the Bushmen. Okay, so he discusses that in this section. Okay, how people came about. It's quite interesting. It's quite interesting. But the summary will follow. And in this first part, I'd like to just share, my analysis of this part. So when we look at the creation account, in the Bible it mentions that the earth was all darkness, it was formless, and the spirit was hovering, and then God spoke and said, let there be light, right? And there was light. And that light was his voice was what made the animals, the plants, basically everything that you see, the trees, the sun, the moon, the stars, and then people were made, from the breath, from his breath, and he formed him from his hands. And in this book, My People, My Africa, a different narrative comes across. There is a god, but he's described as the Great Spirit, okay? And then there's the goddess Ma. So the concept of mother nature, we see this here. So it's more like the mother nature, the goddess Ma, is the one who was creating, was active in creation, and he and she paired up with the tree of life. So they mated, and that's how people came out. And so through mating is how people came out. And so animals, plants came out from the tree of life, right? And then people came out from the goddess Ma, and that is what is being shared here. Another part that I pair with the Christian teaching is that of Lucifer. Okay, so in the Bible we learn that Lucifer was this great angel, top angel who is in charge of music, but a phenomenal angel, and he, because was not included in the creation account, was sort of angered by that, and he rebelled. He formed this huge rebellion against God. And so he influenced a third of the angels, I mean, two-thirds of the angel to follow him. And his claims were that God has got all of these rules and these laws which we don't want to follow. And so, why don't we? Have our own world where there won't be any of these rules, where there'll be freedom. We won't have to follow what he's telling us, all of these laws. And in the same way, in this book, My People, My Africa, we see Zahara. Okay, no, Zahara comes, and he is this deformed creature who is the first one described as being evil. So he comes out and he creates, all of these creatures from metal. Okay, so he creates all of these creatures from metal, and he teaches them to do work, and they're very loyal to him. Okay, so he sort of creates this team, okay, and all of these creatures that he's made, and he influences the people at the time. He comes to the people and says, you know what, you guys don't have to work, right? We have all of these creatures, they can do all the work, right? So his claims were that follow me, you don't have to work. Okay, so I will let my creatures do all of the work, you can relax. And so that's what they did. They followed him, and his creatures did everything, and as a result they became more and more lazy. Okay, so they were sitting back, and the creatures did everything from cooking to cleaning to even feeding them to clothing them, right? And ultimately it led to him even setting food going directly into their tummy without them even needing to chew. So even their jaw muscles were just flabby because they're not being used. And so these two are compared together. Zaharalel in this book, in the story, compare with Lucifer, who had that influential power, but ultimately was leading his followers to destruction, right? His followers were led to destruction. Ultimately, they couldn't do anything for themselves, and he was now the one who was in charge. He was the one who was able, with his metal creatures, able to take over because the people were now too lazy to do anything for themselves. There's also the account of when the water was, I mean, the land was destroyed because the people were just, no good, and so a second group of people were going to be formed. Again, this is very closely linked to the story of Noah and the flood, right? Because the first group of people, God looked down and He was just disappointed, and He regretted the people that He made because of their sinning. And so here in a similar way, um, the goddess Ma felt, you know what, these people are no good. They're too lazy, right? I need to just get rid of them. And so waters came, they destroyed people, and only Amarava and Odu survived from this. And they were the ones to, be the next, or like to be the starters, the pioneers of the next generation. In the Noah account, 8 people survived, and they were the ones, that began the next, generation of people. So I see some similarities. I see some similarities here, which sort of makes one think, right? Are there different accounts of the same incident, right? Um, that happened, because these stories sort of, each and every one of them you have got to actually believe, because it's hard to really prove these, but both of them essentially will be speaking against science, which would say, hey, the world, evolution came up, and which scientists would find ways to prove. And so these stories come up and they say, you know what, this is what actually happened. This is the truth. Believe it or not, this is what actually happened. I'd like to hear your views on this one. Yeah, so what did you think as you read these stories? What did you think, as these stories were sort of linked to some of the Bible teachings? Similarly to the one where Kanya saw the goddess Ma and taking a bath and had his own thoughts when he saw her. Again, that's very closely linked to the story of David, and Uriah's wife. So similar. Once again, that I'm saying, I'd like to hear your views on these ones. Okay, but again, moving on to the next part where we share the summary. Okay, what actually happened in the story. All right, the beginning part of My People, My Africa, the preface, discusses something which already intrigues you as the listener or the reader, because here our Sanusi Credo Mutwa mentions that all of what he writes about in the book is true. So whether you care to believe it or whether it makes sense or not, it is true. These are truthful accounts which he will be sharing. So already it intrigues you as one who would like to know these truths. In some cases, um, your heritage or um, your your history could be based on some of these truths. So a person who's interested in this book, because of that, it carries a lot more meaning, because the author is absolutely unshameful. He shares a lot of these truths as bluntly as they are. He sort of speaks quite, unbiased, and I like that about his writing style. He's very poetic as well in how he expresses himself and his writing. So it makes it even pleasant to read. You already get to feel the poetry, the play on words that he uses as he describes what is happening here. So something that he talks about is a tragedy that has happened, in so many cases, where the Africans were not writing their own stories, they were not narrating their own stories, but someone from the West would come, observe them, in some cases even live with them, learn their language, and then write their story from their perspective. And here, Credo Mutwa discusses that is not the case, that even though a person may have learned the language of the people, there are certain things which the people would not share with this person, because they are not really sure of this person. And in some cases, there are some beliefs about who a white person is and where they come from. And so there are some things which are not shared, were not shared, and so, whatever account was placed out there by the white of the African was not necessarily true, or even if part of it may be true, it's not a truthful depiction of the whole story. And so, he starts off by saying that and saying, you can't really expect, right, a person who comes and observes a society to be the one to share the truthful account of that society. It has to be someone from within who shares that. And so, that's what he does, Again, we absolutely agree with him, because there's a lot of what, as an African, you would know your grandparents would share, which was shared with them, but none of it is written. So he comes across and he explains that, number one, he was a custodian of the truth, right? Or can we call him a historian? He was the one that was keeping a lot of secrets, these cultural secrets were told to him, right? Secrets of which medicines to use for what and why certain things are done, why certain things are not done, some stories, some accounts which have happened, and all those kind of things. He was growing up in the environment where he was told such things and told to keep them to himself. And so he writes this book with an interest of informing other people of a lot of these truths which were shared with him. He also makes mention of an oath that he took, a blood oath, when his beloved Sutu wife uh, was killed, and he did not really take that very lightly. He was killed in a war, in a Western war, a colonizers' war, and he was really affected by that, and he took an oath along with the relatives and siblings of that wife that he will avenge for her life. Yeah, and so one of the ways that he oathed in his blood oath was that he would share the truth. He would speak the truth for what it is. And so that's what he has made his sole mission. Come what may, he wants to really express himself and let this message be known. Okay, so in the following chapters, we'll be looking at some stories that he shares, which already we have heard in the introduction that these are going to be truthful accounts. Okay, so let's not debate them. By the way, if you ask in the time frame, he talks of, even when Zimbabwe was called Rhodesia, right, back in the day, like old accounts when South Africa and KwaZulu Natal was called Zululand. Okay, so it's a couple of years back. This is the time frame that he was talking of. These were the things that were being talked about back in those years, right? So, but again, it does not mean that they have changed in being truth. They will continue to be truth because these are truthful accounts. Right, so we look at the different chapters that he discussed. I'll be sharing summary of the stories that he discusses. The first chapter in the beginning addresses the story of beginning or the story of creation. Now, the Christian, the Jewish teaching, right, of creation, as you can find in the Bible, is of 6 days of creation where a mighty God spoke and everything came into existence. He spoke and it was, right? And in 6 days, everything was created, including mankind. And on the seventh day, he rested and hallowed and blessed that seventh day. Now, when you arrive in the first chapter of My People, My Africa, Credo Mutwa discusses the African teaching or the African narrative of how people and creation came to be. Now, he talks of a goddess Ma. Okay, now if you've heard of Mother Nature, this is closely related to that because he explains that the Great Spirit, okay, which would be God in this case, had taken the time to delegate the task of creation to the goddess Ma, and so she was to create. And though she was imperfect, so for example, she had the ability to create, but even in how she looked, she was imperfect. She had one breast longer than the other. There was some form of imperfection that she had even in how she looked. Her feet were not the same length, so there was just something which was not she was not symmetrical, she was not perfect. And on top of that, she had certain feelings or certain weaknesses that plagued her, or that she was more like cursed with. So things like anger and envy and hatred were her weaknesses. And so, though imperfect as she was the one given the directive to go out and create. So she goes out and from her imperfections, from the chaos that was around her, she goes out and she creates. And while she was busy creating, for example, how she made the rivers, she cried desperately, feeling this feeling of loneliness. So she cries out. And yeah, and when asked why she's crying, she could not stop crying and a river was forming. She explains that, she's feeling lonely. She'd like a helpmeet, someone to be by her side when she's creating. And, like what silenced her tears was when the great spirit said that, okay, well, I'll give you a partner, right? And she was curious, how will my partner look like? And she was told, well, the spirit said, I don't see no beauty. Okay, so I don't see beauty, I don't see ugliness. I will just give you a partner because that's what you wanted. And in days when she was still busy out, creating from her imperfections, she heard a voice of one who said that, I am your partner. She was so excited. She goes out to meet, the owner of this voice, and to her surprise, it's this tree. It's this tree that, took the time to just intertwine itself to her because she was not interested in having a tree as a mate, and this was not a good-looking tree as well. And so she decides to run away from this tree, and she runs, and the tree is chasing after her, and she kept running. The more she ran was the faster the tree was running. It was constantly, just behind her heels. And, at some point, she just ran up to the skies, and the tree threw, something to hit her, and hit her by the back. And, that's how she eventually was caught. And the tree held onto her tight and said, I will never let go of you. And so in such a manner, they held onto each other, they mated. And after some time, she felt, these pains, right? She felt the birth pangs, and she looked up to the skies, to sort of distract herself from the pain. And soon enough, there was an entire nation, born from her. And so they filled up the Kalahari. So more like these were, the first humans were born into the Kalahari. Okay, it's sort of implied that way. And then from the tree, by the way, the tree was called the tree of life. From the tree of life came plants, came fruits, came animals. Okay, so they came out from that tree, and so that's how things were created. The animals that you see, the plants and everything, and the humans, they came from the merge between the goddess Ma, the imperfect goddess, as well as with the tree of life. Um, so yeah, from then, people then, sort of started spreading out, but it all began with this unison between these two. To sort of add to this, the historian Credo Mutwa explains how a lot of times when you follow uh, the carvings which Africans left on caves or even on statues that they made, you'll find that there's a lot of of carvings to depict this, of animals coming out from trees, right? Yeah, so as they're coming out, is because this is where they came from. And he also mentions here that the Ndebele people of old, as well as the Zulus, made some statues, right? Because they believe in the tree of life and they worship the tree of life for all that it brought into the world. And so, with that, he's explaining that if you follow the story of the people, the history of people, ask them these kind of questions, you'll be surprised at their narrative of what happened when creation began. Okay, so this is the creation story as according to the African historical records. So as the story continues, one of the the creatures, right? Or maybe one of the human mothers, right? The custom at the time was for every person who gives birth, you take the newborn child to, they call them the koala birds, and they would be the ones to observe this child, sort of give the child a name, give them that entry into the world. And so this parent, by the name Nelesi, um, again she gave birth to the first deformed child. So she takes her child, takes them to the koala birds, and they look at this child and they saw evil. And so they decide, no, 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 you have got to get rid of this child. You have got to destroy this child. This child is absolutely evil. For the sake of humanity, get rid of this child. But the mother Nelesi would not, would not uh, cooperate at all. And so she decides to take a child and run away with the child instead. The koala birds gathered together and they chased her, insisting that she must get rid of this child. This is not just, this is not a good child. This is an evil child. And when this child is grown, he will bring havoc into the world. But she would not listen. She took a child, ran away with the child, and found a hole, jumped in the hole for what seemed like about 1,000 years. And she stayed with this child in this hole and raised this child in this hole. And so they kept on looking for her, but could not find her. And the child kept on growing until one day when the child came back, from his ventures, and he came back and he was carrying some metal piece, and he showed to his mother. He was even singing a tune, humming a tune. The mother seems happy. Okay, well, these are good news. My son is happy. But then his son, right, shows him this metal piece. And as he looks at this metal piece, he sees how this metal piece is growing. Okay, it continues to grow. It grows, and the mother becomes uncomfortable at how this piece is growing and how, it doesn't feel right altogether. She sees evil now, and even in her son. And well, the son then reveals to her that, well, this piece is going to come and attack you. And the mother is trying to speak for her dear life. I saved your life. I am your mother. They wanted to kill you when you were born. I took care of you. And her son responds that, well, you were doing your job and I don't need you anymore. And, I've got a bigger mission to destroy the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything on earth. And so the mother gets devoured by this metal piece, which softens and grows and forms other creatures, which really kill her. And then they take up the sun and they go after the koala birds and they kill even them. Okay, so then, I mean, she died remembering the warning that she received that, hey, this child of yours has strong signs of evil. Had she listened at the time, it could have prevented the evil that entered right into the world. And so this is again their depiction, according to this African story. This is the depiction of how evil entered into the world through the form of this deformed child. And so, after reading the koala birds, this deformed child, who now became the chief by the name Zahara, he had followers. Okay, so he had followers, and he created a lot of these metal creatures, which were doing everything that he would say. So the thing with them, they could not speak; they were quite dumb, right? But they would do everything that he would say. If you told them to do anything, they would do it with no question. And they were even self-destruct at his command, but they were not questioning anything that he was saying. And so what happened is he actually came to the people and said, hey people, I've got a better way. Instead of you following the teachings of the great spirit and goddess Ma and doing all of this work and slaving away, what you can do is, here I've created these metal creatures. They can do all the work for you, and you don't have to do anything. Okay, they will do the hard labor. They will do the plowing. They will take care of everything of the fields. You know what? They'll even bathe you. They'll clothe you. They'll clean you. They'll even feed you. It got into a point where at a wish that came from just any wish that they'd given, uh, they would not even need to choose. Food will just go directly into their mouth. And so that practice allowed laziness to be born. It continued, and people were just not willing to do anything. If it seemed like a bit of work, they were not going to do it. Why do it? Because, hey, these metal creatures are doing everything. The idea of reproduction was just too much work. These people and their lips were even, sort of like not doing anything, right? So were they just were extremely lazy, and their body was extremely out of shape, and they were just extremely unproductive because of that. And so when they were in their worst state, then Zaharil Zaharil I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but Zaharil sent his metal creatures, and it was now easy to destroy these people because they couldn't do anything. They couldn't lift a finger. They were just simply that lazy. And so what he did is he overpowered these people and he replaced humanity with these creatures. So now humanity was just taken over by these metal creatures, which were just busybodies listening to the chief, who is Zahara. And this continued, and up until the Great Spirit looked down, and even God, the goddess Ma, looked down, and I mean, they'd even gone to attack the tree of life because they didn't want more humans to come and arrive into the earth. So they stopped the tree of life, so that no more production will take place. And so the Great Spirit came, and he decided, what, I don't like what I see on earth. I need to destroy this earth and come up with a new earth. Okay, and so the goddess Ma decided to save this pair, this two humans, a male and a female, and there was going to be yeah, so the whole earth was going to be cleaned up altogether with water. And that makes you already think of the flood story, right? Noah and the flood. It makes you think of that story, but this is narrated in a different way. But yeah, so waters came and they were going to fill, the earth, and Zahara took his followers, and they built rafts, and they were able to swim and be in a safe place, right? While the lazy humans were the ones which were destroyed because they could barely even walk. They were just that lazy. Okay, so the goddess Ma saved the female and the male, right? From all of this when she had attacked Zahara. And yeah, so ultimately she defeated Zaharalel and his metal creatures, right, by use of this molten mud, and sort of burned them because again they're made of metal. And yeah, so then led that this female and the male were the ones who were led to safety amid all of the waters that were in the area. Now, this female was called Amarava. Her name was Amarava, and she was chosen because when all of the people continued leading lives of laziness and not doing anything, this utterly sedentary lifestyle, even being lazy to eat and just allowing their bodies to just deteriorate like that and not working, their muscles to just not work at all. So Amarava was the one who stood out because she continued to work, right? She did not allow herself to just be lazy like that. And so she was chosen because of that, as well as because no other male was found like her. The goddess Ma chose this low human, right? It's not even human, it's like lower than human form. They were called the Bjanis, and those sort of men made, they were made by Zaralel. And but also they were the ones who were still continuing, had the zeal for work, right? So this was a creature could not really speak. It was made of animal like flesh, right? So it was absolutely hideous. But that was the one that the goddess Ma chose to save alongside with Amarava. Now, Amarava could not even stand the sight of this hideous creature, but because of her gratitude for being saved, she thanks the goddess Ma and says, well, because of what you've done, I am going to, take care of this husband that you've chosen for me, and, we will build nations, right? We'll multiply, be fruitful and multiply. And but she knew very well that she did not intend to do that. Okay, she was absolutely unattracted to this hideous creature who could not even really speak. And so they went on with this male, and they went on and they're starting now a new life. And this creature, right, was really obeisant. Whatever you told it, it will do it. No questions asked. And was absolutely dedicated to work. So he went and he immediately started building a shelter, a very good shelter. Whatever Amarava needed, he would do it, and he would do it very, very well. That's just his work ethic was on a very high level. Now, and Amarava constantly was thinking, how was she going to escape the love mate? Because she could not imagine herself with this hideous creature. And so she orders this creature, this male creature, to just sleep. Okay, so sleep because I'm telling you. And so he doesn't really argue it. He goes and he sleeps. And meanwhile, Amarava had planned to start this fire. And so she orchestrates that a fire comes up quickly, it gathers and becomes strong very quickly. And when she sees it's forming and it's pretty strong, she runs away. She looks back, okay, wow, there's no way that the creature would have survived that, and she goes away. And as she ventures out, alone by herself, she comes across this tree and she climbs the tree and she wants to get a bit of rest, right? And in her mind, concluding that if she rests low, creatures could get a hold of her. Who knows? Animals, lions, whatever. But if she's up, at least, she may have a better life, a better chance of being saved. So she goes up a tree and sleeps. And to her amazement, by the time she wakes up, she was taken down from the tree. She's in front of these three frog like creatures, and they're looking at her and they're talking in this foreign language she doesn't even understand. She's absolutely uncomfortable. She wants to escape, and they call an even bigger frog who comes and looks at her. And they decide, you know what, she's the one that they've been looking for because they were out of females, so she would be the female to help carry on their generation, okay, their lineage. And so she tries her all means to run away, and she doesn't really go far, and the frog-like creatures catch her again. And it's her duty to stay here and be the wife of this huge frog-like creature. And so she gives birth to a lot of children, numerous children there, which the author describes as the Bushmen and the Pygmies. Okay, so those people, apparently they stemmed from that story. And because the children also were mischievous, they were thieves and not doing really well, Amarava becomes angry at their behavior. And so she even curses them, right? As if you'll never amount to anything. You will just, you will die out. You will not continue, and those kind of words, which later on sort of became true, is what historical records say. Um, and so, the Bushmen, the Pygmies, were apparently of that lineage. And it so happens that she finds a way to run away again, and she was met by Odu. Odu again was that male creature that she ran away from, the one she had instructed to sleep so she could run away. And she's surprised to see Odu, right? How is it that Odu you here? And it turns out that the goddess Ma had seen her intentions and had notified Odu. So while Odu was obeisant and sleeping as being told, he ran away just in time, but just before the fire started. So he was not affected by the fire. And so now Amarava finds herself with Odu again, and he's still hideous. She's still not attracted to him, but again, he's described as better than the frog-like creatures. And now Amarava has no choice but to be with her, well, to be with Odu, to be with him. And so they stay together, and now she's going to be this loyal wife to Odu, this creature. And in time, Odu learns to speak. In fact, he had learned to speak, so now he was able to communicate with her as well, and was no longer just a creature who's mute, but now he could also express himself. And so they bore children again, and now this is apparently the lineage of the Bantu people. Okay, so the bulk of the African people, the Bantu people. Um, so so that is where apparently their lifeline, or their historical background or their creation came about. Um, so they lived on in this for some time, and after some time, Odu got tired of just being this animal, this half human, half creature, half, you know, man-made, and so he sort of becomes tired of life, and he goes on to this, depression and things like that, and ultimately he dies. And now Amarava is sad because now she's gonna be by herself, and but now unfortunately she can't die because she is a goddess, so she is an immortal. And so, this pains her as well, and so she has to continue with her life, but Odu is no longer in the picture. We also got to learn of how the Hottentots came about. The author expresses that the history of the Hottentots began with another, you know, uh, godlike creature by the name of Kanya. He was absolutely hideous as well. No one really wanted to stay with him. He really, really looked, ugly, but he saw himself as absolutely handsome. Okay, so he loved how he looked. He had 3 feet, one leg which resembled an ostrich leg, and that's how he's described. But he loved himself. He was almost full of himself, right? He believed himself to be absolutely handsome, and everybody else must be, looking ugly because there's absolutely everything right with him. And people really didn't like him, and they didn't really want to associate much with him. But he wanted a wife as well, and but no one really liked to stay, close enough to him. And so this one time he saw the goddess Ma taking a bath, right? Again, if you read the Bible, you would immediately think of the story of David and Bathsheba, right? Yeah, and the wife of Uriah. And and so and so he sees the goddess Ma taking a bath, and as he sees her, he's attracted to her. But now he knows that no one likes to look at him, and so he changes himself into a millipede, and just so he can come closer and closer and look at the goddess Ma. And just when he's close enough, he then turns, right. He changes again, and he heats up the water, and he grabs a hold of the goddess Ma, and the goddess Ma is so angered by this, and such that she curses him that, what, you thought that you could, just have your way with me. That's absolutely not going to happen. Because of that, I will ensure that you will not have any wife. You will not have any wife. You will always yearn, but you will not have any wife. And so that's the curse that he gets. And sort of saddened by this curse, he decides, what, he will make a wife for himself. So he goes out, mixes some portions, and he makes a first wife. But the wife looks at him immediately. When he sees him, he just decides, no, this is absolutely hideous, and the wife that he made by himself, would not have anything to do with him, and wants to run away. And so he gets rid of that wife. He mixes some portion, and he makes another wife. And apparently this wife even was like purple in color, right? And uh, but the wife looked at him again, felt that he was absolutely too hideous, could not stand. Wow, how can she be even, so close to something that looks like he did? And so he got rid of the second wife as well. And the third wife, which was now a yellow one, he made a yellow wife. This wife was apparently smarter, and he decided he won't really freak out. Okay, he won't make it clear that she freaks. She will appear as if, she's okay with him. Okay, so she keeps her emotions, and wants to find another way to run away for her life. And he convinces her he convinces she convinces him that he's absolutely handsome, and wow, she's very fascinated to have him around. But you know what, he needs to prepare himself for such a big day, as the day of sharing the love mate. And so she delays that experience because she wants to run away before that happens. But again, she wants him to feel safe around her and to trust her. So, and so it works. And so the man goes out and he's preparing himself. And in the meantime, this lady finds a way and she runs for her dear life. And by the time the Kanya notices, she's already gone and she's hidden in caves. And while in hiding, she has a dream of a mentis, okay, a mentis who sort of says, you know what, you will be my wife. And she's comfortable with that. She's happy with that in the dream. And when she wakes up from the dream, she sees a mentor. And sure enough, they fall in love. And he's the one that that she shares their love met with, and they bear children. And those children are the Hottentots, according to the author. Okay, those are the Hottentots. And so they come from that mentors. And so they were happy and they bore many many children, and the children, by the way, were not born the way that mammals give birth, right? But they were born as eggs, same as amarava. They were able to give birth to crystal eggs, and so many children would be born from those eggs. And so, the Hottentots were born because of that. And soon enough, Kanya found out where his wife was and where she had been hiding. And so he set out to attack the Mantis. And so they had this war, and the Mantis managed to beat or defeat Kanya. But later on, the Mantis also died. So both Kanya and the Mantis died. And, so it was believed that the Hottentots would not really last long because their maker, as well as their gods, sort of were killed or sort of died. And so because of that, they will also not be able to last. And so it's quite interesting when you follow the history of the Hottentots. And one of the people that stand out is Sarah Batman. And some people would say, like, even though she had a condition, she had a medical condition. But there would be some people, even when on carvings, would associate a drawing of the Hottentots to like a mentis kind of a figure, right? It's quite interesting when you see that, and when you read the story as well, how these were sort of paired together in the historical accounts. And so that's what happened. And that's what happened in the stories. And in the next section, I'd like us to sort of discuss what is happening here. Do share your views of what is happening here. Again, it's quite interesting to pair this with a lot of the teachings which have been known, which have been shared. So it's more like different kind of narratives of similar accounts. It's quite interesting to share on the next one. Well, let's just discuss some views about this.